The two prison guards who were supposed to be watching over Jeffrey Epstein the day that he hanged himself have now admitted that they falsified records from that night. But as part of a plea deal, they are unlikely to face any time in jail. This story is out of control, and it still continues to raise questions about what really happened on the night that Jeffrey Epstein died. Now, let me give you the details on what we know about the trial, what this plea deal is, and then we can talk about our own analysis on this. As Slate reports, the two Bureau of Prisons employees, Michael Thomas and Tova Noel, had been charged with ignoring their duties and lying about it. Specifically, prosecutors accused them of napping and browsing the internet rather than checking on Epstein every 30 minutes like they were supposed to on the night he was found dead in his Manhattan jail cell. So they weren't watching over him, and apparently in order to avoid getting in trouble, they falsified records to make it appear as though they had been checking on him. The two guards had been charged with lying on prison records to make it seem as though they had made the necessary checks on Epstein before he was found dead. They had pleaded not guilty to making false records and conspiracy to defraud the United States. But now they admitted to having, quote, willfully and knowingly completed materially false records regarding their rounds. So it's important to note that their change in plea needs to be accepted by the judge. And if the judge accepts it, it is unlikely as part of the plea deal that they will serve any time behind bars. Now, that is an interesting question on its own that maybe we should talk about right now if you're open to it, Cenk. But also, it still continues to raise questions in my mind about what happened that night, and I'll explain why in just a minute. Cenk, if they falsified records as part of this plea deal, do you think it makes sense for them to avoid any time behind bars?
It 100% depends on the context. So if we're talking about a rando case, turns out that their excuses, one of them was napping and the other one was checking sports scores and buying furniture online, okay? When I first heard the guards were conveniently off duty, I thought, man, they better have a good excuse. Then I realized as they came up with this weak sauce excuse, they actually didn't need one at all, because napping sounds believable, shopping online sounds believable, checking sports scores sounds super believable, all of it. And why does it sound believable? Because most of the time, when things go wrong at work, it's laziness, right? And so would you be shocked to find out that some guards were lazy? And let's say that nothing went wrong that day and they falsified records, should they go to prison? Well, it sounds pretty harsh to send them to prison for falsifying records. There should definitely be consequences at work, you know, et cetera. But if the most important prisoner in the country hung himself because you were snoozing or whatever, and then you falsified records, yeah, there should be huge criminal responsibility. One, why? It had a huge impact what you did. Two, this was not a normal situation. You were supposed to be incredibly vigilant here. And then number three, honestly, so you can get them to flip. If you say to them, oh, slap on the wrist, you don't have to worry about it. Well, the next time somebody's guarding Ghislaine Maxwell, his co-conspirator who's currently in prison, they could say, somebody offers me, I don't know, make up a number. We don't know, obviously this is the speculation part. Somebody offers me $1 million and I could be set for life, or 2 million or whatever the number is. And I just have to pretend I was napping, and then they let me off. There's no criminal offense at all. Oh, I might have trouble at work. Who cares? I just got a couple of $1 million. Then of course every guard can be bribed super easy. That's why it's a criminal offense.
Yeah, and remember, they initially pled not guilty, and then they decided to change it based on this plea agreement. You know, sometimes individuals will agree to a plea or a plea agreement because they're worried that they're gonna deal with an unfair case or they're gonna be found guilty anyway. I don't know what their motivating factors were, but I do also think it's important to mention that their defense attorney has cited the fact that they had been on multiple long shifts without any breaks. This particular correctional facility has been understaffed, chronically understaffed for a while. And so I looked into that, and that's actually true. So the napping at work doesn't appear to be lazy officers not doing their jobs. It seems like they were overworked and as a result fell asleep on the job. But anyway.
No, we don't know that. I mean, I have no idea what their motivation is. They might be 100% telling the truth. They might be 100% lying. I have no idea. Were they overworked? Sure. Is that a good enough excuse for, oh, there's the guy who has information on all the most powerful men in the world who, theoretically had suicidal thoughts before. So what? I'll take a nap. No, obviously you should be fired, and yes, in this case, I think there should be criminal consequences.
Okay, so now let's get to some of the things that have continued to raise questions in my mind. So this was honestly a mix of awful either mistakes, I don't know if they were intentional, obviously I don't want to speculate, but there were multiple things that happened that night that led to Jeffrey Epstein doing what he did, taking his own life, okay? So Epstein was left without a cellmate, for instance, even though he had made a suicide attempt 3 weeks earlier. On the night that he had hanged himself, he had been taken off suicide watch, which I think is strange, especially when
Very strange.
Very strange. And then here's the other thing. So the New York Times reports that security cameras did not show anyone entering the cell block where he was housed. The indictment said, suggesting that despite the conjecture and conspiracy theories swirling around him and his connections to powerful people, his death was a suicide, as New York City's chief medical examiner had ruled. But I thought that was a strange excerpt in that New York Times piece. And so I could recall that there were actually issues with the security cameras. And I wanted to check in on that and see what really happened. And yeah, 2 cameras that malfunctioned outside the jail cell where financier Jeffrey Epstein died. The 2 cameras were within view of the Manhattan jail cell where he was found dead on August 10th, 2019. He had been taken off suicide watch prior to his death. So what happened to the cameras, right?
Yeah.
Well, as Reuters, Mark Hosenball over at Reuters reported, the cameras were sent to Quantico, Virginia, the site of a major FBI crime lab where agents and forensic scientists analyze evidence.
So Anna, when I read a good article, I immediately go to see who wrote it. And I was so unsurprised to find out this was Mark Hosenball. He's one of the best reporters in the country, very quiet, understated guy. We used to interview him all the time back when he worked at Newsweek. He's just a no-nonsense, straight reporter, right? And so he has the actual news at Reuters, which is the 2 cameras that looked at at Epstein's jail cell happened to malfunction. Oh, hell no. And guys, I have great credibility on this because on the day that he died, I said to you guys, if the cameras by his cell worked, then it was likely a suicide. If magically they happened to malfunction, then they killed him. And we found out later, oh, well, you look at that, golly gee, the 2 cameras right by his jail cell both malfunctioned. The 2 guards who were supposed to look at him both happened to fall asleep or be looking at the internet.
Could it just be a crazy coincidence that they didn't give him a cellmate, that the 2 guards who were meant to check in on him just fell asleep on the job and didn't do their job, and that the 2 cameras facing his cell just happened to malfunction? Maybe it's just a crazy coincidence.
Right, but our whole lives we've been told by places like the New York Times, ignore your lying eyes and believe the government. I mean, look at the way the New York Times framed that story. They didn't tell you about the 2 video cameras that looked at his cell malfunctioning. They told you about some other far away cameras that were not malfunctioning. Why did they frame it that way? Why did Reuters have the real story and the New York Times had a weird cover up? And I don't think that the New York Times is in on it and that there's some sort of conspiracy that involves the reporter, the editor, et cetera. No, it's their frame of mind. Whatever the official government story is, it is very likely to be right. I bow my head, right? And that's what the New York Times does all the time. That's why I respect Mark Hosenball for writing a very normal, straight, factual story. So anyways, look, guys, that is a hell of a series of coincidences. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. Do I know for sure? I don't know. I wasn't in the cell, right? And so he apparently tried to commit suicide 3 weeks before that. If that's true, I don't know if that's true either. But if that's true, well, okay, then maybe he tried a second time because he had an opportunity because the guards weren't there, et cetera, et cetera. But if I was investigators, the number one person I would look at is who made the decision to remove his cellmate, right? And take him off the suicide list, okay? Because whoever made that decision is higher up than the guards. And that is a very, very questionable decision. I would look at the chain of command of those video cameras and did anyone repair them before they malfunctioned? And so if it sounds like I'm not believing the official government story, yes, it's true. I am not believing the official government story. And if you just believe it because the government said it, you're not a real reporter. It doesn't mean the other side is true. It means we certainly don't know what happened. And it looks as deeply suspicious as any case I've ever seen. And it's about the guy who knew some of the most powerful men in the world were child molesters. So now we're all supposed to go, no, bow your heads. I don't accept the official story. It sounds ridiculous. And is the FBI going to actually look at the camera and figure out what happened and come back with the real story? Maybe, but oftentimes it doesn't turn out that way. And if I was Ghislaine Maxwell, his co-conspirator that's sitting in prison right now, I'd be the most nervous person on the planet. You better hurry up and tell people what you know already, because magically your cameras and your guards and your cellmates can disappear overnight as well. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.